So the thing goes up, it comes down, and he's got the Wi-Fi connection, but no rocket. So he decides to try to just grab the data. It's like, oh, we'll build another rocket, right? We really need the data. So he went for that. But we eventually wandered around with the phone doing the Wi-Fi, it's over here.
Were you able to like see the signal get stronger and weaker?
Yes, actually, believe it or not, that happened. And we wound up with a little Python program that reads acceleration in time, and integrates, it makes velocity, and it makes distance, right? So we have that. That's
Is this Oyster River? Is this the entirety of Oyster River?
Yeah.
Just walked in. Welcome.
It's kind of like October sky.
kind of,
They
yeah.
end up doing all the calculations to figure out
Lowest level?
Okay.
Password is it's in light green on the board. Password is lowest level and all
I
those.
see.
Thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Jeff, Brett.
You're going to
So, dude.
So, he wrote the Python.
Yeah, I'm hoping
data
that's
capture himself. Well, because Stellantis has coaching, right?
Yeah.
So he said, okay, so I got to make a loop, I got to print a file, and I understand this. And then we wrote it for
Yeah.
But he did the.
Your hands on it's amazing. As you can see, you're just like, down to 11 answers. So I'm like, I can do that.
I know. I had to see.
The whiteboard too.
How's everything else?
Good. School's good.
Good.
Classes good.
So like you go to this,
Having one of
that
those
seems
days, you know, it's
way convenient. Like I said, so I set up my phone.
I know that feeling.
Do the first license. I think it's like every 50
So like we invite, right? It's one of those like.
It takes a picture.
Start with the dementia.
Like automatically.
You know what keeps us going when we work here? It's the gym.
Oh, you
The
got
building is a gym. Hey, Chuck. Yeah, the building's a gym, right? So that
You
keeps
can
us.
go down and do a thing
Supposed to say hi?
Hi.
Just dropping off, saying hello.
Cool.
Cool stuff.
You come in and hang out for a few minutes.
We're gonna head out, we got some errands from, but, Jeff?
Yes.
I'm Brad, I'm Charlie's dad. Oh, sorry.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Mike.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
And we'll leave you to it.
All right. Thank you.
Is that why you're doing this laptop?
It's probably gonna take me like,
That's the
how
one.
many sessions do we have? We have 4 for
Broadcast.
this class. It's just gonna take me to session 5 to learn
Okay,
everything.
we'll get you one.
I'm Jeff.
Roland.
Roland. Jack. Jorgen. I don't. Drew. Gordon. Michael. Brett.
Marcus.
Hey, I know you. Yeah.
I was, at some point it transitioned from me saying them to people saying them themselves, so Gretchen and Charlie.
Yes.
Okay. Last class I handed around masking tape. That helped me. I don't know if it's gonna help
The
you.
name thing is tough.
What's that?
The name thing is tough.
Yeah. We're gonna wait a few more minutes and see who else strolls in. How many
Yeah, your class is on time.
I know.
You guys are awesome. My
Hey,
class
how's it going?
is really late.
Good.
Well, you know, I was keeping one of your students hostage.
That's okay. We got her.
Lowest lab 5 is what we're.
Yeah, and the,
I'm excited
the
to see
password's right
the
there.
one I'm using has a really small print bed and has like a 5 print bed.
Oyster River squad in the.
You know,
That's it. In the few minutes we have, what kind of robot are you using? Do you know?
Reverse.
That's it, you guys.
what's it called? What's the
Are you going to be doing robotics later in the year? I heard it was. What platform is that on? The regular first search?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Fun.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, we have to change that, right?
Next 2 weeks. Yeah. we can have-
All right, good. So as you do development there, in the Discord or here, if you need, we got questions, something's going kind of funny or whatever, we've had some experience there. So we're happy to do what we can. Help you out.
I need some assistance because I could not get anything installed.
Okay, it's not a problem. So there's a couple different ways we can handle that. We can try to help you install it, but we've also got these 2 computers, which both have Fusion loaded up. There's probably another 1 or 2 kicking around. So we've got something you can use, definitely not a problem. But did you run into a problem installing it, or you just didn't get around to installing it, or like?
Well, I got got stuck on their website, I didn't really know where to go.
Was it-
That I
yeah.
couldn't download it because I thought it was my personal computer. And then also my internet sucks.
Sure.
So I got to that point that it would have taken me like, took me like 3 days.
3 days to
Yeah.
download.
Yeah, 50 megabytes.
You're like next level.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say that for tonight, whatever makes you the most comfortable. You know, if you wanna hop on one of these, that's fine.
I'm gonna need one of those. I have Linux, it's also an i3.
Yeah.
That's why I have Linux on it, because.
The i3 is not so much a problem, Linux, that's a problem.
I don't know.
I'd like to download it while I'm on like Wi-Fi. I don't know, like a survive with an i3.
Can almost guarantee the Wi-Fi.
Integrated graphics, something like that stuff.
I do.
I know, that's because you don't think it's yours yet.
Oh, it's up there, it's at the street.
Yeah, anybody who wants to get on the Wi-Fi, the network is called Lois Lab. Yeah, do all your downloads now. The password is Lois Lab 1, all lowercase.
Hey, Amelia. Hello.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. He is at Portsmouth Middle School.
Download everything I thought I'd undownloaded.
And we might be in the control room, we might have to handle Jeff's Mac.
Okay, I can do that.
Well, because I think if you do that, you can share the screen, so if anyone were tuned in,
Yeah.
they would see what you were doing. So you guys just sync up on that.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about that job, but basically the stream is set up and ready to go.
Okay.
And so, can I just kind of show you what's
Yeah,
going on with
sure.
that real quick? So, have you run OBS before?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So, yeah. Sometimes we get people who can't make it in or whatever. Also, we record the sessions, so if you want to go back and watch them again later. Yeah, this is our super high def, incredibly high fidelity microphone.
It is the webcam.
Yeah.
Hey, did you get a haircut? Oh, okay. That's what Anthony looks like post-cut. That's your goal. You want your hair to be that long after it's cut. Okay.
So just real quick here. The size that Fusion is right now, right, is what's actually getting streamed. Anything off here and off here is not getting streamed. So I have the OBS window over here. Okay. So, and I've got 3 hotkeys set up. So hotkey number 1.
But I do have my new.
Option 1, you see that changes over the webcam. Option 2 changes over the screen. And then that's just the splash screen. This is the last one. So you can leave it on the webcam and I'll talk, whatever. But if you're following along with what we're talking about and you switch over to the screen here, then the people on the stream would actually be able to see the modeling. So it's up to you how much you want to do, but if you feel like following along with the steps that we're doing, then when we're recording the stream, the people will actually have to see.
So are you just saying like do the stuff on your laptop?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just because OBS and everything.
I'll just put my mouse on your laptop.
Yeah, that's probably good.
Sure.
Let me get, hold on, let me get.
So wait, I was more careful than I
You need a
needed.
USB port.
Oh, yeah, I do.
That's all right.
You can just steal my mouse, it's fine.
My handheld, they're both like $40.
Oh, yeah, are there any more mouses?
Mice? Mouses? I can get your mouses, one second.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, no, just do it 3
I look
times.
at I look at Donald Light.
Save it up. If you save it for like a nice long wood one resonates good. Or they've got like carbon fiber ones. Trees. Yes.
So, to get what I was saying about OBS, we're gonna kind of see what's going on without that being on the screen. Does that make sense? So anyway, so command 1 is
You did
answer.
360, there's
To be able to toggle the key. It's not right.
I did, and it
But
didn't work.
Anyone else who's gonna attempt to do 3D design without a mouse? 'Cause
I can't do it on this laptop anyway.
I'd say it's not recommended.
Oh, yeah, I don't know if I brought my
Do you want to borrow a laptop?
I might
or
actually
I'll
have
up
one. Oh, I did
here?
not.
That's all up there. I want to figure out how to download. Actually, is there not something
Nibble with
for
the track on.
that too?
Yep.
I got my mouse.
Back it off? Just for a minute. Sure, we can have your laptop.
Do you want my laptop? Is that back?
That's kind of weird. Look at this.
You're gonna like kill the sticker. You're gonna kill the
Yeah, that's
Right.
such a time.
Yeah.
This makes
No.
sense.
No.
You've been
Alright, yeah. So,
Yeah, now I'm in, and it's like, hey, you're good, have to join the team.
I
As
do.
far as I got.
I would ask
so
my
you go
manager
for
about
the
that.
download, and then,
Hey, guys,
I can move on to
should
the
we
computer, I just want to
join the team?
figure out how to look at stuff.
I did.
That's
Sort of
You made sure like a
where
goofy
it
one?
says create your
Oh, I
own.
just put my name.
Yeah, I would make
Create
some.
your own.
yeah.
Sure.
So I thought that
How are we creating it? I just kind of just like,
Yeah,
grab my name.
that's right.
might be smart.
Create
It's
your own.
different.
I was like, okay.
We'll get
Okay,
organized.
so, well, the other thing is,
I
let's see,
don't
I
know,
can use
I
that was running straight.
It's the welcome email, right?
Yep, that is the welcome email. So, can I help you out for a second? I don't want to, you know, drive for other people, but I'm not gonna do this.
Clicking mouse in and it's not panning.
It's not really good. The software is
Okay.
amazing.
So go to the Autodesk.
Right, I gotta go help Danny and Leo, so you're in charge.
That's
Okay.
Zoom.
Yeah, you just gotta.
Right, where'd you
I'll-
go? I pressed, oh,
Okay, so
I
you-
was. It is going in and out.
Why isn't there a hotkey?
You are one.
This
That's
works.
great.
By the way, look at this. Remember.
Okay,
Look
so,
at
well, we could do that, or why don't we, do
Alright,
that later,
how do I
and
go?
I will log in and
How do you
download
do-
the installer for you.
Jordan,
And then we'll
how
do
did you do?
How did I do what?
Why is your screen yellow?
Oh, because I let as well.
Disgusting.
And our living has never been in a dark room.
I just have so easy.
What's up?
Yeah, mine just like it
And so, once we install Fusion, you can log out of my account, into your account, or whatever you want.
I'm hoping to make it
Like, for
work.
now, we're just gonna grab the install.
Yeah, big shocker. And then I do have one.
It's like a fancy toilet seat. It's like a toilet seat for a rocket.
What were you doing with Teams?
For ship space shuttle. It's actually it's the inside of all that.
Awkward silence, sorry.
So the first time I downloaded this stuff,
Yeah.
I opened up the program to see what it looked like.
Yeah.
My computer.
Freaked out. Like, it felt like I was in like a fighter pilot seat. I just immediately closed it and like the window
It's
comes
okay.
up. The window comes up that says, oh, you
Why is it doing this
closed
thing
out
again?
awfully quick. Is there something we can, I'm like, no.
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
Just don't want to look at it.
I had to do that too, also.
How do I get my perspective?
Where's it going?
How's the year going for you so far?
Good.
Nice.
Good.
It is, we started with,
Every time I try to pan it, it zooms out. Look at this, I pan and then there it goes, it's gone. Well, I
So
thought
let's
that
just
was-
kick this off and get it rolling. We're gonna talk for a few minutes anyway, so there's a pretty good chance we'll have it installed by the time we're actually.
It's gone.
Yeah, so start going on what's going on.
Yeah, what?
So, do you wanna kick that off and run the install? Okay, I'll check that out. Are you in good shape?
Zooms out.
Nice. Maybe you're the right person to do that.
It just zooms out exponentially. And I'm more just.
Okay, so, how many people we have? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10,
But it's been pretty fun. Like,
11, I think that's
And there's an online course.
everybody, maybe minus 1, so that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Alright, so let's get rolling. Got a bunch of stuff I wanna cover tonight. Wrote down all my notes carefully. I'm Jeff. Hi, everybody. I will try to learn all of your names. It's gonna take me a little while. I'm gonna make jokes about that a lot. I like making stuff. I have a slide up, but that's okay. I make all kinds of things. I use 3D modeling a lot. Some of the things that I make are up here on the table, but and we'll have a chance to kind of look at those. But I'm pretty enthusiastic about 3D modeling. It's the kind of thing that I use like every single day. I make robot parts with it. I fix broken machines. I help other people learn how to do 3D modeling. I find it to be a really helpful tool. You know, like creatively, like if I have an idea and I want to sketch something out before I go and build it, like, you know, that's one thing it's good for. But you know, like start to finish, you know, imagining a machine that I want to make, and then spending an hour or two modeling it and then putting it together, you know, to me that's pretty magical. Like it's, you know, imagining something and then creating it and holding it in your hand. So this is something that Michael and I, oh yeah, he took off, but Michael and I work on a lot of projects together that sometimes turn into things that we teach here in these classes. And so this is just a little mini robot. It's going to drive around. It's going to be like a mouse in a maze. I think we're going to program it to solve mazes. I think that's the goal here. But you know, this started out. This is a Raspberry Pi and a little motor controller, and then just a whole bunch of 3D printed parts. And this was, you know, maybe 4 hours of modeling, and that includes a whole bunch of iterations. So it's a really flexible thing. You know, you don't have to be into robots to take advantage of this. It's something you can use as a creative tool or whatever. I've designed furniture with it. Ilya, you did a project recently that used 3D modeling. Not to put you on the spot, this is Ilya, our teaching assistant. Do you want to talk about the robot for a minute? How do you feel about that?
Yes. So, I made this. Well, I modeled the nose cone off of
the rack of iterations of the nose cone over there.
Came with the rocket. These two came with the rocket. But I took all the measurements and modeled like a clone Fusion 360, except I added this little sled that had a Raspberry Pi, accelerometer, and a little quadcopter battery on it to measure acceleration. Believe it or not, the quadcopter battery, like 250 milliamps, will get it running for like 2 hours, something like that. But it was sort of my summer project.
How'd that turn out?
Yeah, it was great. We launched on Sunday. So
Awesome.
Recently.
And I think we're hoping to give the model back to the company that sells the rocket. You know, because they probably have other people who want to cram Raspberry Pis in rockets and send them up 1,500 feet. I don't know. I'm just sort of hypothesizing. So, yeah. So anyway, 3D modeling. I guess the upshot of all that is 3D modeling is cool. We're using Fusion 360 in this class, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons that I like it is it's free for teachers and students to use, also hobbyists, which is a pretty cool thing for Autodesk to let us do. If you sign up for the trial, like a lot of you did, if the trial runs out, you just say I'm a student or I'm a teacher, and then you get a 1-year license, and you can renew it after that. So it doesn't cost you anything. And we're going to be using it for like technical part modeling, the kind of stuff you might use for robotics or nose cones of rockets and you know that kind of thing. But it can do a lot of other things too. It's got a whole sculpting environment. It does toolpath generation for CNC. You can save stuff out for 3D printing. It's incredibly versatile. So yeah, I'm a little bit of a Fusion fanboy, but you know, the way that I'm going to approach this is to teach modeling concepts in a way that isn't tied to that particular program. So like if any of you guys have used something like SolidWorks or Onshape or any of those other programs and you like those better, that's fine. The stuff that we're going to talk about in here, there's going to be some kind of nuts and bolts, this is how you do it sort of stuff in Fusion, but the concepts translate. So whatever you guys want to use as you go forward, you know, that's totally up to you. I don't know, anybody have any questions before we kind of fire things up and take a look at the program and get rolling? Any questions for me about, I don't know, where we're coming from or where we're going or what we're doing here or anything like that? No? Okay. Emilia, how are you doing with the install? Is that still running?
Yeah.
Okay. If we start walking through and looking at the interface a little bit, are you guys cool watching along and we'll just catch you up when we get it installed?
Cool,
Okay.
appreciate it.
So, if you guys want to fire up Fusion if you haven't already, and can I get a brave volunteer? Both of these screens have Chromecasts, and if somebody wants to cast their screen up, it would actually be kind of helpful if somebody's not shy. As we're walking through some things, I can sort of say things and then gesture, and that would be very helpful. Anybody? Anybody?
I don't have Chromecast, but.
Do you have Chrome on your laptop?
I sure do.
Okay, so if you bring up Chrome and you go to the little 3 dots in the upper right hand corner and you click on that, there's a thing that says cast.
You did the input for desktop first.
What's that?
You need to select inputs and then hit desktop first.
Yes, thank you. Yep. So in the little thing that pops up that says, you know, the things you can cast to, there's a sources.
Screen,
Yeah.
TV, sources.
Yep, and yeah, click on sources and change that to desktop.
For what?
And then you might have to click on your desktop to select it. But that'll share your home screen.
Okay, and then
And then why don't you put it up on the screen right here?
Oh.
That's all right.
So, I'm gonna do this up and screen right?
Yeah, go ahead and click on the desktop. Awesome, thanks. Just one other thing about sharing and collaborating and stuff like that. The way that we typically work here at Lotus Lab is everybody is collaborating, everybody's working with each other. We're going to be working through some things, especially if you guys have never done 3D modeling before. Some of this might feel a little bit confusing. Don't get stressed out. Don't feel like any questions are too silly, first of all. And don't be afraid to try something out or make a mistake or anything like that. Like, we laugh at mistakes here, like it's amusing and it's normal and natural and it's how we learn. Like, if you're not screwing up occasionally, you're not pushing the envelope at all. So, if you get a question about how to do something or something that's going wrong or whatever, we'll ask you to cast it up on the screen. We're all going to be sharing, we're all going to be collaborating. So, okay, so the first thing I think that makes sense, normally the way that I like to teach stuff like 3D modeling and building stuff is to just give you guys a challenge and have you kind of rip at it. But in this case, we're going to try to dump a whole a pile of knowledge on 3D modeling in a relatively short amount of time. So we're going to walk through some parts of the interface together, which is a little bit more like I'm standing up in front of you and lecturing a little more than I would like. But let's just kind of go through some things. So has anybody used Fusion 360 before? Anybody? Wow, awesome. Okay.
I have.
Oh, okay, all right. We're gonna look so smart. Okay. So this is the main interface, okay? If you couldn't figure that one out. And the arrangement of this thing is relatively logical once you know where everything is, okay? So the first time you install it, it may or may not show these grid lines. Does everybody have the crosshair grid on? Yeah? Okay. We don't need to explain that one. If you look at the cube in the upper right-hand corner, where it says like up, front, back, side on it, there's a little indicator that shows the X, Y, and Z axes. What one is vertical for you guys? Z? Excellent. That did not used to be the default, which got really annoying when you went to 3D print something and all your parts were sideways. Okay, so I'm glad they fixed that. I won't need to show you how to fix that one either. So, okay, let's go through the basics. So, along the top here, that's the toolbar. All the operations you need to create or modify shapes are going to be found up here. These are sort of like primitive operations, like creating a sketch, creating primitive shapes like cubes, cylinders, spheres, things like that, and then modifying them. If you don't know what all of those terms mean, don't worry, we're going to go much deeper. Over here on the left-hand side, we have the browser, right? And that tree view is how Fusion organizes important objects in the modeling operation, okay? So what I mean is, for example, we're going to create sketches, two-dimensional sketches, that we're going to then evolve into 3D shapes. And those 3D shapes are called bodies. And those bodies come together in collections called components. And then those get put together into assembly. So you've got this sort of hierarchy of stuff, sketches, bodies, components. Those get arranged in the browser on the left. And so as we go to edit them or create new ones or whatever, we're going to use that tree view on the left, okay? Has anybody used another 3D modeling program like
Tinkercad?
Tinkercad, good example.
Maya Blender.
Okay, wow, all right,
Tinkercad.
cool. Anybody use SketchUp? It's kind of
I
old.
I used SketchUp in the past.
SketchUp is like 2007, right? But anyway, just to illustrate the point, one of the things that used to kind of drive me and a lot of other people bonkers about SketchUp is you create this incredible part, and then you realize that like one of your holes is like a millimeter like off to the side or whatever, and you can't just go and edit and say move that over a millimeter. Like you can end up having to redraw a whole section of your model. But what Fusion does, and most modern 3D modeling programs do, is you've got this thing down the bottom that's the timeline, right? It's a little bit obscured right now by the start menu. Actually, if you make your Fusion window a little smaller, we might be able to see it. But basically, as we do things in Fusion, it's going to create entries in that timeline. Okay, like you do a sketch, you stretch the sketch into a 3D body, you carve a hole through it, you know, whatever. Those things are going to appear down here in the timeline. And what that means is you're going to be able to go back and edit them later. So you draw this, complicated, apparatus here, and you realize that you need this to be a little bit longer. You can just go into the operation that extruded this part and say make it 10 millimeters longer or whatever, and it just changes everything else, and it all just works, and it's really easy to edit and revise your parts. So that's the timeline. We're actually going to use that in a few minutes. Okay, so that's the basic layout here. Okay, but 90% of what we're going to do in Fusion when we're creating a part to create a 3D body is going to be to do a sketch, something in 2 dimensions, and then do something to that sketch to make it 3 dimensions. Okay, so for example, just a really simple example. If you were to draw a circle on a flat plane in your workspace here, then you could do an extrude operation and create a cylinder, like that, for example. But there's a few other operations as well. Like again, I'm going to speak about like the 80-20 rule a lot here. Like 80% of what you do in Fusion is creating a sketch and then doing something to make it 3-dimensional, and then 80% of the time it's an extrude. But if you needed to create that cylinder, you could also do it by creating a rectangle and then revolving it around an axis. And then you would create a cylindrical 3D body that way as well. So we're going to go through all of that, but the point I'm trying to make here is that in Fusion, there's usually like 5 ways to do everything, which is kind of cool on one hand because if you like doing something one way versus another, you got that sort of creative freedom to do it. It also means that there's almost never a right or wrong way to do it. But choosing one versus the other on those sometimes has consequences down the road. And so as you get a little bit more used to using the program, you're going to be able to make some choices that's going to make your job. So, all right. So let's, why don't we make our first model? I'm going to use Ilya as an example again, if you don't mind, buddy. So he told you about the big rocket we launched this past weekend. This was an earlier part of that summer project, right? So you guys ever seen these things before? They're little stomp rockets. You put them, yeah, exactly. You put them on a tube on the floor and you stomp on the thing and it shoots up and hits the ceiling or whatever. This one, when you load it up with this much stuff, though, only goes about this high. Like you were like jumping up and down on this pretty hard, right?
Yeah.
You got like your head height. But this was an important part of the project, right? Like we needed to see if we could get the Pi working with an accelerometer and get some kind of reading, because this is easy to do over and over again, right? Like we can stomp on this thing all day long and just catch it. But every time we send that up in the air, if we're lucky, we don't have to build another rocket. But, like at a minimum, we're burning an engine every time. And if something doesn't go, you want to do everything you can to make sure that that rocket does what it's got to do on that first launch. So anyway, was this the first part you 3D printed?
I think so.
Right, so Ilya learned how to use Fusion so he could model this part, and that was like his first initial test on that whole project. And so why don't we recreate this part, okay? I think that this part is going to be a good example. If you look at it, it's pretty straightforward geometry, right? If you, let me remove the battery pack just to get it out of the way, so you can see the part a little better. If you take a look, this part here is pretty blocky, right? It's only got a few features. They're pretty rectangular. There's a circular hole, right? But it's pretty straightforward, right? So this makes a pretty good example for us to start with. If you guys want to pass this around and take a look at it, if that helps you to kind of visualize it, but we're going to go step by step in recreating that model, okay? So the first thing I want you to do, you're still casting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first thing we got to do is create a sketch, and that sketch is going to become the first part of our 3D model here. Okay, so if you go up to the Create menu here, and choose, and by the way, if you guys are ever casting, you're going to want to look at your own screen rather than the monitor, because the lag will drive you nuts. So click on the little Create, the drop down next to the word Create, right here. And one of the options there is Sketch, Create Sketch. Looks like it's the second one down. And it's going to ask you where you want to create that sketch. Now, we don't have anything on our work surface yet except the three base planes, right? X, Y, Y, Z, X, Z. Did I get that right? I think. So choose the XY plane, which is the one that's flat on the grid surface. So that's this one over here. Perspective kind of messes with you, but yep.
Go ahead and click on that one.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter if you want to draw it on another plane, that's fine. You're just going to be stretching in a different direction when we go to extrude.
So that's just shifted now that it's showing just a flat.
Exactly, right? So you're in a 3D view, you say create sketch, you choose the plane you want to sketch it on, and then it takes you to a 2D view of that work plane. Everybody with me so far? Yep. Okay.
And they're color coded.
What's that?
And they're color coded.
Are they?
The X plane and the Y.
Oh, yes, yes, they are. Yep. Okay, so the first thing, when you're creating a model like that, you kind of want to start with the most prominent feature, and for that part, that's that big rectangular section in the middle. Okay. And the whole point of this first exercise is to illustrate the idea that basically you can get pretty far in Fusion by drawing a 2D sketch and then stretching it into that third dimension. So let's start with a rectangle. Okay, so if you go back up to the create menu again, there's shortcuts, and you can feel free to use those, but I just want you to see the whole menu here. Under rectangle, the first one, 2-point rectangle, go ahead and click on that. Now, as you go through the menus in Fusion, you're going to notice that a lot of the options you can click on have a little letter next to them. Those are hotkeys. Okay? When you get comfortable in the program, you can use those hotkeys, and it speeds things up significantly. But for now, just, we can find the stuff in the menu and click on it. Now, bring the mouse down and click on the origin, and snap there. So go ahead and click once to start your rectangle. And then go like up into the right maybe. Okay, so see how we're starting to draw our rectangle here? Okay, now we want the rectangle, let me just check my notes here. We want it to be 35 millimeters on the side, so we're already working in millimeters. Now you can try to stretch it out and get it to be exactly 35 millimeters, but like it's a little challenging to do. If you see this number here that's highlighted, when you're stretching out the rectangle, it gives you the length and the width in little hovery boxes. Right? If you clicked and finished your rectangle, you might want to undo and redraw it. But anyway, what you can do is, as you're drawing the rectangle, you can type a number in, and it'll fill in those measurements. Right? So Gordon here typed in 35, and that popped into his x-axis here. If you hit tab, you'll jump to the other box, and then type another 35, and we'll end up with a square that's 35 by 35, and then you can hit enter, and it'll accept those values. Cool. Good job, everybody. You drew a square.
Do I need to do the origin?
What's that?
Because I drew mine not on the origin. Can I drag it now? Put it where?
You can, but you can also leave it where it is. Let's see how you land there.
Cool.
I don't think it's going to cause any problems, but this is an adventure. Okay, so see way in the upper right, you get a button that says Finish Sketch. Go ahead and click on that, and that's going to take you back out to three-dimensional land. Okay. So now we have a 2D rectangle or a 2D square drawn on the base plane in 3D space, right? Let's make it 3D. So the way we do that is go to, I think it's the modify menu. I should know by now, I use it all the time. Nope, I lied. Go over to the back to create and go to extrude. And then go and click on the square. Somebody has a Discord link. Okay, so we want to go up to 70 millimeters. You can click and drag that little blue arrow, or you can type wherever you like, and then hit enter if you type. Does everybody have something looking vaguely like that?
Is it
No?
70? 70.
Yeah, 70. It's in the upper right. If you're still on
I
screen.
just exponentially zoom out. I start pressing the mouse.
And so then it was
There it goes. It's on.
in the create menu. 70 here. 70.
Stop.
Hey, look everybody, you created your first 3D thing. You guys all stoked?
Yes. That's very cool.
Yeah? You could 3D print that. You could have your own rectangular solid. I didn't mention it before, but we have a couple of 3D printers here, and you guys we're not going to use them like right this minute, but the resources of Lois Lab are available to you guys, right? So Michael and I are here every afternoon. The software development happens over there. And so if you guys want to come in after school, like before like 5 o'clock or so, if you got a print to kick off, that's cool. You're also welcome to kick off prints and things like that. Why are you smirking right now? Okay.
Because I can.
Okay. You can also, you're welcome to, use them when we're here for class and things like that. So these printers are pretty good. I use them all the time. I've used a lot of printers. I like these. So anyway, I'm digressing about 3D printing. Okay, so we've got our first three-dimensional shape. So how are we going to get it closer to, where did the rocket go? Where's the stone rocket?
Oh, it's right here.
Can I have it back? Thank you, sir. Okay, so we've got this central section, right? I would say the next most prominent feature, I'm kind of going from the most prominent feature to the least prominent feature. It's probably going to be that hole going through the center that the rocket is mounted in, all right? So let's add that. Now, when we did our first 2D sketch, right, we had to use one of those base planes, like the XY, I'm going to screw this up, XY, XZ, and YZ planes. Oh, I'm looking at you. But Fusion will let you draw a two-dimensional sketch on any flat surface on any part, okay? So you're not limited to drawing it on one of those base planes. So just to be a little different, since we're going to add that circle, that's going to be that hole, let's add the next sketch on the top surface of that solid, right? So go to Create, Sketch, like you did before, Create Menu, Create Sketch, and then click on the top surface of your rectangular solid, and it's going to take you back into 2Dville. And we can add that hole. Now, we want to put a hole in the middle of that part. And there's not really any features in the middle of that part for us to key off of, right? So how are we going to get a hole right in the center? Now, if you guys have done 3D modeling before, you might know about things like dimensions and constraints and stuff like that. That's lesson 3, right? So we're kind of we're hacking mode here, right? We're not being super formal about our 3D modeling. So let me show you a couple of shortcuts. First thing, let's get the circle tool. You can use the button in the toolbar, or you can go to the Create menu and go to the circle option and use center diameter circle. I think it's the one with the little C next to it. Yeah? Okay, now if you come over here and you hover near the middle of your square, you don't get anything. It doesn't snap to a center or anything like that. The way you work around that is if you take the mouse pointer and you run it along this top line of the square, it's going to give you a little symbol at the midpoint. The triangle and X is snapping to the midpoint, okay? If you run the mouse down this vertical side on the right here, you're going to get another snap midpoint. Now bring your mouse across to the middle. There you go. Now it's giving you sort of gesture lines, telling you where the middle is. You've got one from the left and one from the right. So if you click to start your circle now, it'll start at the midpoint of that figure. Cool? And you want to make that, if we're being dimensionally accurate, you want it to be 17 millimeters. If you make yours 18, though, you're not going to like it. I'm not going to give you a failing grade. I'm not going to give you a grade at all.
I will. I will give you.
Okay, Gretchen she's going to be judging all of you. Okay, so 17 millimeters, same as before. Click to start the circle, click to end the circle. You can type in a number like 17 if you don't want to like carefully stretch it to exactly 17. Everybody following along okay? We all doing okay? How you doing, Charlie? I haven't heard from you. You doing okay?
Yeah.
Need a hand or you good?
I think
Oh, you're doing great. Jeez, you're like, yeah, you're rocking it over there. Good job. Okay, so
I kind of fell behind because I was clicking around.
that's okay. Do you need a hand or?
I want to draw the circle, so I'm in Create.
Yep.
I'm in Sketch.
Yep. Now, what I was saying before is choose the circle tool from the menu. So create, circle, center diameter circle, or center circle, whatever it's called. And then
I see hole. We're not just going straight to hole.
you might not be in the right mood. So do create sketch first,
Yeah.
right? And then click on here.
Okay.
So you start a new sketch on the top of your
And
rectangle.
there's my circles. Okay.
Yep. And so you can use that tool.
Center there.
Yep. And then did you catch the thing about dragging across the top and the side?
No.
So drag.
It helps kind of find it.
Yep. So hit escape to uncircle.
Undo.
Yep.
Okay.
And then let's see. Go back and drag the mouse along the top line here, and it'll snap at the midpoint.
Where else would you?
Yep. And now draw it down this side as well. It'll snap to the midpoint over there. Over here.
Oh,
To
sorry.
the right. No, it's okay. Right hand side, you drag down.
I hate.
And when you see that midpoint, go back across the middle, which will give you an indication of both.
Look what happened.
You draw your circle, make it 17 millimeters.
Cool.
All right, cool. So now that you got your 17 millimeter circle, go ahead and click Finish Sketch.
Poking holes everywhere.
Go ahead and hit Finish Sketch. Go back out to 3D land, rather. Go one more time. Yep. Okay, so now we have our rectangular solid thing with a circle on top. Go ahead and find that extrude tool again, which is up in the create menu. Now, just for sheer amusement value, as my voice cracks, that was not the amusing part. So choose extrude, and then click on the circle. Now, if you click on the circle and then grab that little blue arrow and drag it upward, that's not what we want, but you see it extrudes the circle up, you get like a peg coming out of your solid. If you drag it down the other way, a couple things happen. First of all, it turns red, okay? And I don't know if you noticed over here before, the operation in this little box over here, it said join before, now it says cut. So Fusion, when you drag your extrusion into a solid body, it automatically switches over to cut mode. It assumes that you want to remove material, okay? So drag it all the way down through. You can drag it too far, you're not going to do any damage. Yep. And then you go ahead and hit OK over in the extrude menu, and that carves away any of the material in the center. All right, so now we have a rectangular solid with a hole in the middle. We can put this on a stomp rocket now, right? Let's keep going though. This little shelfie thing over on the side here, this was providing support to the battery pack that was, sorry, this thing here, was providing support to the battery pack that was powering the Pi, okay? Anybody want to guess how we're going to create that? Yes. So yeah, that was great teamwork. You said sketch, you said extrude. So which surface do you want to draw that on? And which direction do you want to extrude it? Want to take a guess? So which surface do you want to draw?
From the side.
So like on this side here, and extrude out this way? Yeah? Can you think of another way you could do it?
You could extrude the bottom out. You could pull the bottom. You could push the bottom up a tiny bit and then pull it out a little bit and then pull it out.
Yeah, you could do that. You could also, so when we started, we drew a square on the XY plane in Fusion. We could draw another square right next to it on the XY plane and extrude that up this way, right? So this is kind of getting back to what I was saying about there's like 18 ways to do everything in Fusion, right? But let's do the next thing we haven't done before. Let's start a new sketch on this side of the rectangle, so that's like over here. So do create sketch and click on that side there. And then we're going to draw this thin little rectangle here. It's 3 millimeters tall, okay? Draw that little rectangle along the bottom here. How wide is it going to be? Anybody remember? It's 35, yeah. But it doesn't really matter because as long as you draw the full width of the rectangle, it's going to be right.
Select the 2-point.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I would do that. And then maybe start, if it were me, I would probably start at the origin, right? So click there, then go across, and let it snap to this edge. Like if you take the pointer and you touch it against the edge of the rectangle, it should snap there. Yeah, go up a little bit. Yeah. So, is it not snapped? That's weird. Usually it would. Okay, well we'll help it along a little bit. So type in a 3 for the height, and a 35 for the width, and then hit enter.
This is much easier when you get everything about it.
And then we're in a pattern now, right? You draw the rectangle and you hit finish sketch. And you probably know how to extrude it, right?
How far out?
How about 25 millimeters?
And I gotta grab this guy down here and pull him out.
Yep. You gotta, yeah. It looks like you might have chosen both surfaces.
Alright.
So click on the top one again and that'll unselect it. Nope, I lied. What is going on there?
I don't know.
Click on the upper one again. It looked like, why are they both blue? That's so weird.
Maybe it's all like those X.
Click on the little X next to where it says one selected. That clears them. And then go ahead and click on the lower one again. There you go. That's what we want.
And grab that guy.
Yep. And bring it out 25 millimeters.
It's cool. It's like,
Whoa.
yeah. Order.
It moved. Whoa.
Really excited about extrusions.
It's alive.
Okay. We got one more of these. I'm not going to walk you through this one because this is almost the same as before. We got another extrusion that comes out the top here that we mounted the accelerometer onto, right? So also make that one 3 millimeters wide, okay? But it's on the side opposite the one that we just kicked out here. So the whole thing is going to be kind of like L-shaped, right? So for anybody who couldn't see there, It's this upright piece here that's perpendicular to the one we just did.
Oh, no.
Okay, so this one here. So make it about 3 millimeters thick, and
How do I select that side to draw on it?
so
If the lag is tough, you're right.
yeah, you want to look at your own screen,
Yeah.
definitely. So do a new sketch.
Yeah.
So do create sketch,
Okay.
and then as long as the surface is flat, you can draw on. So click on that top surface,
The
even though it's
top?
got a hole in it. Yep.
Okay. Oops,
Nope. That's okay. Just undo.
undo.
Oh yeah, that. I didn't tell you about the undo button. That's it right there. This button is your friend. Okay.
Does Control Z work?
Yes.
How
Unless
far
you're on a
should-
Mac. And then
What's
it's
that command?
the little,
How far should we extrude that up?
Alright.
30 millimeters.
And I gotta create the sketch. And I'm gonna grab the
Yep.
top.
Man, you guys are pros.
There we go.
You're drawing sketches and extruding shapes. Ooh. There's no stopping you guys now. You're gonna be making robots next. So, you guys kind of getting a feel for what we're doing here now? Is this pretty straightforward?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You draw something in 2D, you stretch it in 3D, and everybody's happy.
No, but Xander, you don't understand. I literally make everything scale, like I would scale the measurements and percentage-wise based on one, and then in my like 3D printer export, I would scale it millimeters back to real time.
Yep.
It was a process. It was.
Okay. Very minor side point. So I had all the dimensions written down because I didn't want to be, stopping and measuring this thing every 30 seconds as we were walking through all the steps, right? So I wrote them all down ahead of time. But yeah, of the various tools that we have, that's my pencil. That's how it rolls.
Oh, what am I doing?
You guys seen these before? Calipers,
Oh, yeah.
micrometer thingies. Some people call them vernier calipers, but that is technically incorrect.
It's a brand.
Vernier?
It's like it's not.
Well,
it's
it's a brand
table
named
tennis, not
after
ping pong.
the.
Yeah.
They took the name, the
Um,
brand took the name.
But vernier calipers have a vernier scale as well.
I don't know.
It's
Are you trolling me?
That was just
All right.
I gotta ask, is it 30?
Yeah, I think it was 30, but honestly, like, you can make whatever you want. Yeah. I mean, like, we used all of the space on the Stomp rocket, but that's because we put 2 accelerometers on there so we could compare the readings of both of them. Like, you can make your little extrusion smaller if you want. But anyway, if at some point we're going to be doing some modeling, I'm sure we're going to be copying something else, right? These are great for that, okay? So if you need to take a measurement, you just spread the calipers with your thumb and close it down using the flats, and it gives you a measurement here, and 35 millimeters-ish. If you got to measure the inside of something, like if you needed to know the diameter of this hole in the Stomp rocket, the other side of the calipers, right here, is for inside measurement, okay? So what that means is you can put it inside and stretch it out, and it's got 2 more flats, and it'll give you, right, mind blown. Yep. Okay, if you didn't know that one, I got one more that's really gonna shock you. Okay, if you need to know how deep something is, like how deep this pocket is, you see this little thing that's sticking out the bottom here? That's a depth gauge. So you stretch it out, right, and it gives you the measurement right there. Life changing.
Stocking stuffer.
What's that?
Stocking stuffer.
Yep. Actually, yeah, it used to be that like an actual set of machinist calipers would be like $300 or something like that. You can get like these on Amazon for like $15 now. So,
I have mine on Amazon right now.
so anyway, we have like 4 sets of these. So if you guys need to use them as part of your projects, they're in the drawers under the 3D printers. So help yourselves. Okay, so at this point, so Gordon.
My piece on top is sticking out.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How did
See,
that?
my bottom one is, so we need to fix them both.
Yeah,
I went 3 millimeters that way, then instead of maybe.
Yeah, this presents an exciting opportunity.
I did this for you.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say, I didn't even have to tee this up, right?
Didn't we talk about this beforehand?
So, editing and revising parts we're actually going to talk about more in depth later, but just really quick, because great opportunity, right?
Somebody goofed up.
Yeah, so we just want to modify that sketch, right? Remember we were talking about this timeline before? Everything you guys have done in this model is showing up in this timeline. Look, we got sketch, extrusion, sketch, extrusion, sketch, extrusion, sketch, extrusion. And if you hover over, for example, the extrusions, it actually kind of highlights the part that was created by that operation, so you can skim back through the timeline and it shows you what part was created by which operation. So if you double click on the second to last thing in the timeline, that's the most recent sketch you did. It's like the points with the little pencil. Double click on that and it brings you back into that sketch. So in this case, you just drew the rectangle out over open space instead of keeping it over the existing part. So I don't know, can you click and drag that? It's probably anchored. It's probably not going to let you.
No.
Okay, so a couple things you can do. You can delete the rectangle, or you can ignore it and draw the one you wanted, and then extrude the one you want and ignore the one you didn't, right? So that's the easier path to the goal here, but if you want to get rid of that one, double click on the top line of the rectangle, and it should highlight it, and then just hit the delete key. Yep, and then redraw the rectangle over the existing part. Any other questions on your first incredibly successful 3D modeling adventure? No? Anybody lost, confused,
I just
inspired?
did something weird.
Huh?
Go back and tell
That's what I'm trying to do.
Marcus, are you doing something weird? What did you say?
Looks like your footer just got extruded all the way.
It did, and I tried to get rid of it. And
Why
it
don't
just
you
made it bigger.
throw it up on the screen here? Let's look at it together as a team.
Thanks, Jeff.
No, it really does help. Okay, that's Discord.
It's coming. I had to go to Chrome, so.
Oh, I got you.
Oh, we need a
Oh, wait, there's.
Who's that weird guy named Jerk with the purple hair?
I don't want to touch on it.
That's me.
Where's yours?
So if you wanna forget the whole screen.
Yeah, how do I do that?
So are you still, can you go back to Chrome for a sec? Go back up to where you cast. Go down to cast again. And this time just click on sources. Choose desktop. And then go to Streamlabs, so stop your current cast.
That's probably the one
And
spot you
then,
can't.
I'm not sure the sources thing, so can you check?
That's probably the
Make sure
one
it's-
spot
yeah,
that
yeah.
won't.
So go ahead and cast to the
Well,
left
we suck into it for like
and then click on your desktop, just to select it.
Which part? Which part?
Okay, so what do we got here? Uh-oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah. I thought it was like the actual.
Okay, so can you hover the mouse, sorry, I just bumped you there. Can you hover the mouse over the last extrude operation in the timeline? And, is it, what's it highlighting there? Is it highlighting the part on the right? Yeah, okay. So double click that.
No, it's highlighting my little piece on top. It's highlighting my little piece of top.
Alright, so guys, take a look at this. We gotta find the part in the timeline that made our part a little extra wide
A
here.
little.
So, let's see. So can you cancel out your dialog box again?
I'd like to share.
Over there? Go ahead and
This one's
cancel.
cancelled.
I'm doing
Oh,
for you,
cancel,
it's a
sorry.
touch screen, but it doesn't work.
Got it.
Okay, so hover over this little extrude operation down here. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so double click that. Yeah, so was that deliberate or was that accidental?
Oh,
I'm
total
asking in a
accident.
Totally
I wouldn't have
non-judgmental way.
verbally freaked out if it was on purpose.
Okay, so probably what we wanna do is just not do that, right?
Right.
Okay, so go ahead and cancel it.
So what I was trying to, so I had, you know, the little
Instead of
piece,
brilliance there, yeah.
the little piece the battery sits on, I had
Yeah.
it like Gordon did, I had mine 3 millimeters too low.
Gotcha.
So I tried to get rid of it, and then all of a sudden I ended up with.
Okay, this is
giant
super
part
easy to
of
fix.
it. Yeah.
So hit cancel. Okay, and can you change the view? I didn't actually tell you guys how to drag the view cube, but if you click on the cube and drag it, you'll rotate the view.
Yeah, which way do you want it?
Turn it around so I can see the front of the extrudy thing. Yeah, great. Okay, now let's just delete that extrude operation entirely.
Got it, so.
So right click it and choose delete.
Cool.
Okay.
So now just draw on a little rectangle.
Yeah, so where is, did you not draw it?
No, I tried to delete it so that I
Oh, I
could draw
see.
it, and it It must have been that I deleted the sketch, but not the extrude or
Yep.
whatever, I don't know.
So,
So
yeah,
now I
so
can
just
just-
do another sketch and add it in and extrude it, and you should be good to go.
Cool.
Jeff, I keep ending with a large cube on top.
Well, gee, Gordon, what'd you do there?
I don't know.
Okay, so,
Keep going back here,
yeah,
and I got the 3x35. but I'm
Cool.
doing it somewhere
You do it
wrong.
yep, so go ahead and hit finish sketch again, okay? And then edit your extrude operation, so go ahead and double click it.
Here's the visual big picture, that's it.
Okay, and missing profiles, I've never seen that error before, that's new. Go ahead and click on that. Yeah, that looks good, and go ahead and hit OK. It looks like somehow it got confused about where that part of the sketch was.
Where it should be.
Right.
I wasn't sure, it was like, wanted to lay down flat.
Yeah, so we just needed to help find its way, you know, now it's happy and all there, nice on the top box. Okay, that's great, alright, so that's our first model. We would be ready to 3D print that and send it up on a stock rocket. That's super cool. So that was good questions as we went. Anybody else got any struggles or anything that they need a little help with? No? Okay. Are you guys, how are we doing on 6? Oh, we're like halfway, right? Is that how this works? 7? Yeah, right. Do you guys need a minute, or you want to roll right into another exercise? Okay, cool. Let's do another one. So if you want to start, if you guys want to save this, by the way, there's a save button right there. If you want to save your very first Fusion 360 model, treasure your voice, print it later.
Mine's such a great model.
Please name your models like they're like it's really irritating when you go into somebody's Fusion account and it's like 18 untitled. Like,
Untitled 374.
yeah, let's not do that. Let's be good modelers.
Therefore.
Oh, I forgot. Oh, I'm a bad modeler. I forgot to tell you guys this stuff. All right, well, I'll make up for it in the next model. So here's the thing. I don't know if you guys heard what I said earlier, but we're kind of hacking through this. It would be really boring if I told you every single thing you needed to do like proper formal workflow in Fusion 360 the way that they want you to do it. I think it makes a lot more sense to kind of show you like how things generally work, and then we'll go and add in techniques that are going to make your models like more accurate, or make you a faster modeler, or be able to handle more complicated features or whatever. But so I have a lot of sort of like bad habits that I've developed, and I try not to pass them on when I'm teaching them to other people, and I skipped a big one. So anyway, if you want to start a new design, you can close that one if you want, but there's also a little plus symbol up in the tabs of Fusion. You can click on the plus, and it'll open a new untitled design.
How would I close this one? Is it just the X of the tab
Yep.
up here will
Yep.
kill it?
Yep, and if you've saved it, it'll still be there. If you want to get back, see this little, like, it looks like it's out of a Rubik's Cube thing in the upper left?
It's the waffle.
Thank you, I didn't know it had a name.
That's what we call it.
Okay. So this is the project browser. You probably want to go into default project.
Really? Well, I might have
So double click.
I like waffles.
And, or not. Okay, I don't know where your model went. Can you back up? We gotta find your model.
It's gone. I did save it.
Admin project, maybe? How did you end up in, are you logging in root?
I.
Oh, there it is. Okay, great. So
Well,
yeah.
I had to name a work group, so I named it Lois Lab.
Oh, cool. Nice
So
job.
it has nothing to do with you guys, but I just named,
You're stealing our name?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you stole it.
So one of the cool things about Fusion is your models are saved in the cloud thing, right? So if you go and log into Fusion over here, over there, all your stuff's there, right? So you can borrow your friend's computer and do modeling. You can also share models with each other. There's collaboration tools and stuff. Anyway, okay, so go ahead and close the project browser thing. And does everybody have a new untitled project open?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So this time we're going to do something a little more complicated. Let's see. Who is Marcus? You're casting.
Yeah.
I'm going to pick on you for a minute. Can you pop up a Chrome browser? And I'm going to try to stand in a place that is not going to block any of your view, but where I can still see the TV. Okay, let's do a building. Look up Empire State Building. And I chose this one definitely not because it's got very regular and predictable geometry. Scroll down a little bit, there's a Wikipedia page for it. Surprise, surprise. There it is. Okay, if any of you didn't know what the Empire State Building looked like, now you do. Pretty famous. And what I want to get across in this little exercise is you can create very, very complicated 3D models using nothing more than simple primitive shapes arranged, stuck together, right? You start with something, you know, like a simple shape, and then you add more and more details, or you refine details, and you get closer and closer to whatever final shape you're going for. Put that another way, if you were modeling something like this rocket, how would you describe the general shape of this thing?
A cylinder.
Yes. If you were to draw a cylinder about that long and about that diameter, you'd be pretty darn close to the rocket already. And then it's things like that and those and these little things on the side and all that, right? So if you can get in the habit of looking at an object that you want to create and trying to sort of estimate it using simple geometry, then everything else becomes details. Can I borrow your water bottle for a second? So again, well, this is a lame example because it's also a cylinder, but you could start again with a cylinder, right? And then you could add a smaller, shorter cylinder on top of that. You know, and then after that you could add details like a little cave-in on the bottom and a little dimple and, you know, maybe this other stuff. But, you know, at a really basic level, it's a cylinder and another cylinder and then like some lines and stuff like that, right? So we can do that, right? We can do, we can already do rectangles and circles, right? What else is there? So if we can do those things, I bet you we can do that too, right? So let's start with that. We're gonna sketch a couple things a little bit differently than we did the first time. So, Marcus, do you mind switching back over to Fusion? Okay, so let's start a new sketch. So, yeah, create new sketch, and let's start down on the base plane again. Now, last time, I mean, some of you guys did things a little bit differently, but most people started their base square for the last model, clicking on the origin and then going out, right? But with the Empire State Building, it's got a whole bunch of things kind of stacked up like a cake, right? And it's going to save us some time if we draw that first rectangle centered on the origin, and then everything else we stack up can also be centered on the origin. We're not going to have to worry about getting everything lined up and spaced and all of that, right? So use the features of the program to make your job easier. That's why they're there. There's people that use this, you know, professionally for, you know, industrial design and architecture and, you know, technical part modeling, and they get paid, you know, like they make more money the faster they model. So there's almost always a shortcut. If you go up to the Create menu and go back to rectangles, there's an option there we haven't used before, which is the center rectangle. So go ahead and use that. And click on the origin to start your rectangle. And stretch it out up and to the right, just like you did last time, or up and to the left if you're Marcus. And you see now we're drawing a rectangle, but and we still set dimensions, but it's just centered on the origin, so that saves us some time. Make it 30 by 30, same way we did before. Perfect. Great job. Okay, hit finish sketch, and then extrude that up. Now, I'm going to let you guys kind of pick how far we're extruding it, but if you glance back, I apologize, Marcus, I'm going to make you jump all around. If you switch back over to the Chrome browser for a sec, I don't want you guys to obsess about exact measurements here, but I want you to estimate, right? So look at the thing and, you know, like kind of eyeball it, whatever. The 30 by 30, I mean, this building actually isn't even technically square, that's rectangular, but roll with it. Estimate a height that's about from the base up to like this first big kind of cut in, right? We're going to go for accuracy later, but, you know, figure out about the proportions for that. If I had to guess, I'd say you're probably like 150 millimeters or something like that. But just pick a number. This is your building, you know, like figure out a number that works for you.
So
Are you wondering why your view is not what you expect it to be?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you go up here, sometimes when you come out of sketch mode, it doesn't go back to the 3D view. See that little home? Actually, yeah, see this little home up and to the left? Click on that. That brings you back to your default, like, angle view. So that's another little shortcut.
Okay.
So You can do create extrude, or some of you may have noticed that the shortcut for extrude is E. Save some time by hitting E. And then clicking on that, and then wow, that's a big building. So what did you extrude yours to, Marcus?
Would you say 150?
That was my guess, but
Yeah.
I mean, you can make it
That's what I
130 if you want, or 170. However you're feeling today. If you click on that home button again, that's going to take you out to a zoomed out view,
There you go.
which might be handy. Okay, well, it's almost a building. I bet we can get it closer though. So what I want you to do is another sketch on that top surface. And do another center rectangle. And I think the last one was 30 on a side, is that what we did? So this time do 25 on a side. We have a dueling buildings.
What are we doing, sorry?
Another center rectangle on
Another
the.
sketch.
Yep, yeah, so new sketch on the top surface of the, what will be our building. Do another center rectangle and make it 25 on a side. And why don't you switch back to Wikipedia and give me an estimate on that one? I think you get away with, I mean, aesthetically speaking, I think you could get away with making it roughly square. Like you could go up like 20 or 25, but again, this is your building.
I think it's 23.
Yeah?
Yeah.
For homework, you have to do it to scale.
Okay.
Yeah. Just you.
I made it 23. I don't want to get yelled at.
Nice. That looks great. Okay, so this is starting to look a little more building-like. Okay, do another one on top of that, 20 on the side. You may notice a pattern here.
Something's funky.
Oh, funky in what particular way?
Jack, you're not supposed to break it that fast.
So
I don't know what happened to the plane, but it's on a different axis.
that's okay. So let's go back to a
Gretchen,
click on
how
the
far
home
are you going
first,
for
and
this
let's get back to
There you
it.
go.
Last one was 23. How far are you
Wait,
going on this
no,
one?
The most important rule in fusion modeling is don't panic.
Wait, but now, why is it real I took the orbit tool and now
I
it's
just have
vertical
one
again.
solid.
Okay, so Jack,
Yeah.
Jack, if you're ever stuck in a tool like the orbit tool, like poor Jack here, and you want to get back out of that tool, hit escape. Right? That works for pretty much anything. If you're in the circle tool, the rectangle tool, the orbit tool, the extrude tool, hit escape, it deselects the tool. And then click on your little home button and you'll go home to that safe place in Fusion where we all create models. Okay, you've been fine this whole time.
I accidentally there's kids like squares and all goes
I'm feeling better now.
Oh, you're fine.
I was nervous.
Consecutive squares. I get closer, not what is going on?
I don't know what you're trying to do. What are you
I
trying
don't
to
know.
do?
I'm not trying to. Oh, I'm in the.
You just needed to work through it.
Jack,
You're doing a great job. Okay, so Marcus, which one was that?
That was the. What do you mean? Which one was the?
Well, you know,
the
we
third
did
one.
30 and then 25, and then, so is that 20?
20.
You know how you can check if you ever forget?
Ask Gretchen.
I totally wasn't leading into that. No, well, yes, you can ask. But go ahead and click on this line right here that's coming down the front edge of the top of your model there.
Right there.
That's the, well, that one would be okay, but I actually meant the top one.
That.
Yeah, that one right there. Click on that. See this thing right here?
Yeah.
It pops up and it tells you how long that side is. So if you're ever like, oh man, I'm making 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, and I don't know which one I'm on, just go and click on the thing and it'll
Cool.
tell you. That also works for circles and various other shapes. It'll tell you the radius or the.
How far should we extrude the second half up?
The 25? Well, when I did this earlier, I extruded it 25. I think Marcus made it 23. So,
Yes.
you know, be a little creative with it. Okay, so what did we say that was a 20?
Yep.
So why don't you do a 15, but only extrude that one up like 5 millimeters?
Okay.
And then let's check our work against the Empire State Building. I mean, the picture of the Empire State Building.
Wait, is there another one after a 25 one?
Yep.
Okay.
A 20.
So if that was.
And then
20. So what is this?
Marcus is working on a 15. So 30, 25, 20, 15.
Okay. 30, 25, 20, 15. Oh wow, that took me a second. Oh, how
Four of them in decreasing increments of 5 millimeters.
How far is string as well? Like
Have you guys learned about recursion in school?
Considering I don't know what that word is, no.
Okay. That's Michael's class. They meet on Tuesdays. Hey, that looks awesome. Can we see the picture again?
That is the Empire State Building.
What do you think?
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, that is the pic, yeah, that is Wikipedia.
It's a perfect replica.
Yep.
That's it right there.
Okay, so like, is it a scale model? No, but we're definitely capturing the shape of it, right?
Yep.
Okay, so on top of that, why don't you add the spire, okay? Switch over, this time just to be crazy, do a circular, like a tubular spire. If you zoom in on the picture, it actually is sort of round.
Okay.
So, in my notes,
But there's a center circle, isn't there?
that is an excellent question.
That's the.
Center diameter circle.
Yeah.
What are other shapes we can make on the center point? Anyway, yes, center diameter.
All of them.
Yeah, all of the shapes.
One would hope there's a center for most of them.
How you doing, Gordon?
I'm not doing well, I screwed it and I
What are you
just
looking for,
hit
a
one
diameter
solid
or-
higher, so I must have started the original line.
So-
Kidding, I
Yeah,
Look at that.
so let's just, get back on your sketch.
Can you write
And
that
let's,
down?
let's edit your extrusion operation.
Say that again.
Yeah, so it looks like you've got the whole thing. So, click on the little X to deselect what you're extruding, and then carefully click and adjust the center. Yep, all there is to
I
it.
just clicked the wrong.
Yep, no, it happens all the time.
And what was that, it didn't really matter.
Whatever you want it to be, I need mine 20.
Funny.
Yeah.
I think I already shrunk my thing down more, because I was trying to get it to.
That's pretty cool. Are you able to see Marcus's screen from where you are?
Yeah.
You see how the shape is kind of forming up?
Yeah, I kept watching it and kept coming back to mine going, oh, okay, I just have one solid.
You just like closer to Gretchen.
Okay, so 30, 25, 20, 15, and then how big was your circular spire?
5 by 25.
Okay. 5, okay, yep. And then how about one more little antenna on top of that?
Ooh.
2 by 30.
Okay.
Wow.
2 by 27.5.
Nice, Gretchen's in charge.
More circles.
Wait, I'm generally.
No, I'm not good.
I do.
Sarah, where do people? Don't worry about it.
Okay.
So that looks kind of like the same.
It does.
I don't think you selected the right one.
Yep. So that's actually the same thing that Gordon
Oh,
experienced.
man, you needed to zoom in.
Yep.
My
I
second
know.
class.
Well, yeah, or you can edit it.
That's it.
Yeah, zoom right on in there.
Spire.
Are you guys building buildings?
Yeah.
Wait, how do you, I'm trying to
Just
get
for
cylinder,
aggravation,
how do you use
1.7.
the
I am
verification tool?
Oh, there it is.
Resolve.
Beautiful.
Resolve
Very
tool?
well.
Yes, I see.
I didn't think my computer was gonna be able to handle
So,
this.
do
'cause
you
it's-
want the cylinder to be
Of course,
that
the
way?
school department, I don't know.
Oh, okay. I get you. Okay. So to do that, you need an axis to revolve
No.
around.
I can,
Why is this
Um,
thing
I can't
has
do the
not
online
started?
version.
Oh, access.
Oh.
Yep.
The thing
Can you select the edge of it? Will that work?
I spent a good hour last night trying to see if there's anything in through.
Nice job. Okay, so hey, that's a pretty cool Empire State Building.
Yep.
Okay.
That's
So yeah, so I'm not trying to beat the point of it around. This is sort of like a literal example of stacking primitive shapes to get a more complicated shape. Does the concept make sense to you guys? Right. This might seem, now having created a building, right, and seeing how easy that is. This might seem like a simplistic example, but this type of building of complex models applies to pretty much anything that you're going to build. Like where's the little mouse bot? Like, so this also gets into other things like this is modular and all of that, and we're going to talk about that in future lessons, but there's nothing in building this that couldn't be done that way, right? It's flat plates and vertical support pieces and placing them carefully so that they hold the motors in place and stuff like that. But the wheels are just circles extruded and then hubs extruded a little bit further. All of the same concepts that we just went through is what was used to build this. And this is a functional little thing, robot.
Bob,
Bob, right, evidently, I don't know. So she named it Bob and you named it Bratislav? Was
Yeah.
that- Okay, so I don't know, we'll have to put a straw poll out or
I
something.
think I'm moving off.
It was on an online name generator.
Isn't that like a soccer player? Isn't it? I think it's a Serbian soccer player, actually.
It's a Serbian name.
It's probably a
Okay.
few
It's
hockey
surprising.
players.
It's my dad's Serbian.
Yeah. No, I meant, wait, did I say?
Oh,
hockey or
yes.
soccer? Yes, okay. Soccer? Soccer? I don't know. Okay, so, yes, so that exhibits the point. Okay, so, that's enough of me talking. I need a drink of water. I have a challenge and an exercise for you guys. How much time we got? We got 25 minutes, that's plenty of time. Okay, do you guys trust me?
Yes.
I know we just met, okay? Trust me and trust in yourselves. What I want you guys to do is throw that model away, okay? You can save it first, you can say a few words, but then I want you to get rid of it. There's a couple reasons for this. First is the exercise I'm going to give you is going to replace the model. And you don't really need two Empire State Buildings. I mean, that's kind of like, it's a little exorbitant or excessive. But the other thing is, something that I've learned in my several years of 3D modeling is the first model you create is not very good. The second one you create is better and takes you half as much time, okay? Nothing is precious in 3D modeling. Do not be afraid to throw something away and start again. This is going to be a lot more important later on when you start making really, really complicated models with lots of crazy features and you design yourself into a corner because you were designing it as you were thinking it, and you got to a point where you realized that it was a good attempt, but it just didn't work the way you wanted it to. You throw it away, you start again, you reapply everything you learned in that first attempt. It takes you a third as much time to make the next one, and it's way better. If you start getting like emotionally attached to your 3D models,
It's really bad.
yeah, like you gotta just be okay with letting things go, all right? So, what I want you to do is refer back to that image of the Empire State Building. If you guys want your own image, obviously just pull up the Wiki article. I want you to make a more accurate version of this model based on what you learned, okay? A couple things I want to point out. There is a base to the Empire State Building that most people ignore because it doesn't usually show up in the photos. It's like really long and, you know, like a block wide, and that's still part of the building, okay? We also skipped over this bottom section here where it starts to flare out, okay? If you're really crazy, you can try to figure out how to make the texture, but that's a whole other thing. Let's say, Marcus, I'm gonna pick on you again. Let's say you wanted to make this to scale, right? Any idea how you might get the heights right? Any thoughts on how you could do that? Just take a step. Yeah. Actually, that would probably work with this photo, depending on the aspect ratio of the photo.
I'll just go from meters to millimeters, like
Yeah,
380
sure.
meters, just to make it
So yeah,
38 millimeters.
scroll down a little bit. They give you some of the measurements of the building, but they don't give you like how wide the floors are. Okay, so you might have to estimate that.
Okay.
Right. Or you might have to find another source. Right. But anyway, I want you guys, what? Okay, that's like class number 6. I'm not saying no, don't do it though. If you want to give that a try, you go right ahead. If you go all the way down to the bottom of the article, actually there's a picture that shows several, like, you know, world's tallest buildings, and it actually gives you a side view. I don't know if it's a couple pages up. Keep going, keep going. Citations. Nope. Yep, there it is. So this actually gives you a bunch of heights, but again, I don't know how much to scale this is, but you could probably infer it, right? But anyway, start a new model, try to make an Empire State Building as accurate as you can, work through it, get yourself stuck, try crazy ideas, ask questions, ask your neighbor, ask me, and work through them. And I need a glass of water.
Dr. Doofenshmirtz's Why? Who's gonna stop them? It's not as one.
Is there a quick way to just erase it?
Judas is nice.
It depends. Have you saved it? Yeah, so then you can just click on the X right there and it'll say, are you sure you haven't saved it? And you'll say yes.
Yes.
I'm gonna steal someone's cast for an image of the Empire State Building.
You go
So-
right ahead. Probably for the best.
You guys are all doing great, by the way.
I just download Lamasti.
A model of the Empire State Building?
Out here. If I could
You get
find
points for
one.
creativity that once, but if you do that again in the class, I'm gonna have to mark you down.
Oh, darn.
On that grade, I'm not giving you guys.
Oh, is there water, like a water fountain or something?
There is a spring water thing in there, but I don't have any cups. So, I don't know if there's a water gopher in the room. You can stick your
I
head in
can
the
walk
sink.
around.
Yeah.
Wait for it to rain.
Okay, I promise for next week we will have cups. We could 3D print one.
Oh, hey,
Like-
wait, rain.
Well, yes, but it would like you'd be done by the time. Like,
Didn't you 3D print a fork a few weeks ago?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'll tell a story about it.
Done in time for like,
Your food.
done in, not
Should
even
I get
cold,
a
you
cup
would, you would have left
now?
work by now.
You could, but I mean, there's no like you could print like a thimble.
I did buckets, I 3D printed buckets.
Yeah, I just mean that like you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got takeout a week ago or something like that from the place a couple blocks over, and I forgot to grab a fork when I got the food, and I got back here and I was all bummed out. It was a salad with like meat on it and stuff, and I didn't really want to like cram a salad into my mouth with my hands, like it just kind of, especially with the dressing, like it just gets everywhere. So yeah, I think I spent like 3 or 4 minutes sketching a fork really quickly, and then I think it was a 16-minute print time. So I just had to wait 20 minutes before I could eat my salad. And then of course I put it on Instagram because that's what you do. But yeah, it's a versatile tool. I feel like I could tell you guys some other things too. I don't know, can you guys listen and model at the same time, or is that too much of a distraction?
Sure.
Okay. I'm sorry, I forgot your name already.
Roland.
Roland. So Roland noticed my pencil box here. And this is my old printer. It has some flaws on the top surface of the print, but I made this for a friend of mine who's an art teacher, kind of as a joke. But so it's a pencil box, but the pin that the hinge operates on is a pencil. So there's a pencil crammed in the hinge. Yep, there we go. So which actually makes it really easy to model because like hinges, moving parts and stuff like that, they can be kind of fussy. But if you make them big, then they print better. And so using a pencil, which is kind of oversized for a hinge pin, actually worked out pretty well. And then I filled it full of colored pencils. Let's see. I didn't really talk about it in an intro, but this robot over here is one that I designed for the robot design and fabrication class, which if you guys are interested, Drew, I think you're already signed up for it. Maybe we can sucker the rest of the.
I'm signed up
I think
for
they
it.
are already.
I signed up for everything except for the Into the Python.
Okay, cool. So in the robot design and fabrication class, it's not like, you know, we come in and build kit robots or something like that. We want to design from scratch, but it's kind of hard to talk about that in a vacuum. So we start with a collection of these parts and we assemble it as something to talk about. But I try to encourage students to learn a little bit about 3D modeling and the other skills involved in robot building so that they can come up with their own idea for a robot and build that.
Yo, look, I'm done.
That's
You wanna see
amazing.
my model?
Yeah, I really.
You
Wow,
totally got
that
that.
is so good. Did you figure out how to use the import function? Is that what happened?
No.
comment.
I figured out how to do weird cylinders really quickly.
Yep. Good job.
What is that?
What is that?
I mean, oh wow, that was really
Of
difficult.
the design I just created, what could it
Yeah.
be?
So actually, so look at that for a second. How, if you had to model that, how would you do it? Do you have any idea?
I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna fiddle around till I figure it out.
Okay, do that first, and then if you haven't figured it out by the end of class, I will tell you. Because
Okay.
that's something that's actually very useful and we'll probably use in a future class.
Well, I know this. You have to create a form. I don't know what form is.
Well, I know you have to do it.
I know I must do it. I can't stop creating a form.
Anybody want to guess what this thing is? It's
That's
not medical apparatus.
It's injecting.
Well, technically the syringe might be, but anybody gonna take a guess?
Is it gonna be a robot arm? Is it gonna be like a
It's for
hydraulics?
injecting.
Red small gloves
It's
pump.
like Bane.
I like where you're going with that. No, that's not quite it.
It's like Bane. You stick it in your neck and you click the button, it like injects you.
Oh,
yeah, really. Oh.
That Bane, you mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Out of context, I was lost for a second there. So, yeah, yes, exactly. So this was part of a project I did with one of my friends over at the Makerspace here in Portsmouth a few years ago. This was an extruder that you retrofit onto a 3D printer, and it does paste extrusion, specifically printing in chocolate. So basically, we modified the printer so that it had on the print head, it had a cylinder with a heating element in it, and it would keep this syringe warm. And so we'd melt the chocolate, load it up in the cylinder, and then put this in the print head of the printer. And then this motor over here this is a flex shaft, like from a Dremel rotary tool. This motor turns the shaft, which turns this threaded rod in here and moves the plunger down and squeezes out the chocolate. And so you could use the printer to print simple shapes, because the chocolate's pretty molten. But you could print simple shapes out of chocolate. It works. We showed it off at the little mini maker fair that they have over in Dover. So anyway, this is all 3D modeled and 3D printed. Like this is I wouldn't say that this is a super complicated mechanism, but it's got some moving parts. Like there's bearings and rods and threaded rods and, did I just say that twice? And 2 or 3 different moving parts and a syringe and all kinds of mounting holes and stuff. So, but based on the stuff that you're learning right now and maybe the next lesson and maybe one after that, you guys will have seen all of the operations required in making a mechanism like this. So, really what you do with 3D modeling is only limited by your level of interest and the amount of time you want to put into it and sort of your curiosity. It's a really, really flexible thing.
If you're heating up chocolate and putting it in a syringe, is that a sign that maybe you've got a problem?
It is.
Just a question.
Yeah, I think the short answer is just yes.
Someone who likes chocolate.
Yeah.
It's
Can I do that with maple syrup?
Well, see, the problem is that won't solidify. Unless you have, we could maybe do it in like a freezer. Maybe that would work.
I guess I was thinking more of just an IV drip.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, that's intense.
This just went from 3D modeling to support group.
Right, yeah.
I don't know why
You
one
should
thing
make
is so broken.
the clay ones, the ones that print.
Yeah,
Those
well,
are really cool.
so the clay ones were actually the inspiration for that. We went through several different iterations of the design, and where we started was we found somebody who built one that did clay extrusion using air pressure instead of mechanical pressure.
Oh, interesting.
And we just basically reproduced his design to just get a printer working with the extruder and all of that. And then we started modifying the extruder to be the way that we wanted. So the thing I didn't like about the air pressure extrusion is it's kind of hard to control.
Yeah.
So like turning it on and off, it's fine if you're doing a long, slow print at a constant rate. But a lot of times 3D printing, you want to print fast or slow and switch between them.
This
Yeah,
works.
right. So this was an attempt to fix that. So we use a motor driving a flex shaft with a threaded rod. It's very predictable, the amount of material you get out.
What is going on?
Do you want to throw it up on the screen and look at it together?
Yeah, you can look at whatever I'm doing. Trying to decipher the thing you downloaded.
Yeah.
Cast. Right, I just took a cast.
Yeah.
It says no devices found. Let's go with this. They made this dogs that go with cast.
You should be able to interrupt somebody on the screen. Oh, that's weird.
No devices found.
Why can't you?
Do I need
Is
to
it
take
on
mine off
the-
first?
Wait, what Wi-Fi network is on?
He's actually wired in. Oh, maybe that's why. Maybe he's on the Trovo network, not the, okay, I guess you can't cast. Sorry, Jeff. What's up?
Jeff.
Yes.
Why would this take 12 hours to print?
Is it big?
Well,
It's kind of big.
Are you working with solid?
It's,
small. Well, there's not much building.
right. Can you scroll up to the top setting over here on the right hand side? That should be okay. My best guess is the height, so it's just the sheer number of layers. So scale it down by 50% and see what effect that has on the printout.
Jeff, can I answer the question?
Absolutely.
I was going Empire State and it was circle.
Yeah.
Cylinder on top, but yeah, I'm getting the cutout of the wall.
Right, so this is the inverse of what you were getting before. Okay, so you can extrude both at the same time. So,
I got you, so I only extruded the circle that's around them.
yeah, so select the inner shape too. You might have to look down in to click it though.
No, like with a shift click.
Oh yeah, that'll work. Yep.
But if I click and then it just automatically, I'm getting one click and it's extruding.
Yeah, it's defaulted to some amount. You can change the amount. So what are you trying to?
I'm trying to just one solid
Yeah,
circle going on.
so click the inner shape,
Yeah.
right, and then click the outer shape as well.
Oh my God,
I got you.
So you can multi-select things.
I got you.
Jeff, I got a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Send me to a spot where I want to just touch everything wider on the way up. And I want, you said you can edit that, you know. cascade.
So.
In the sense you did this and then go like edit the drawing and it'll make it bigger.
Yep, so let's just take a look at that, like double click on the first one.
Kind of severe, I did that already.
Maybe let's exit out of that one and double.
Oh my God.
Or well, you can do undo or you can do finish sketch. Either one is fine. Double click on the second drawing.
Okay, that's
Yeah, so double click. You could have created a sketch but not put anything into it. That's possible. So you can change the dimensions if you want. So change the number and stuff. So double click the number and put a bigger number in.
So that was like, try that.
Yeah.
Nice. Now you can see that all the way up.
Yep. How you guys doing? Oh, nice. That looks great. You're adding my favorite detail. That's my favorite part of that drawing.
Base or the tip? Your favorite detail?
Well, okay, that is pretty cool. But the part that's like cut into the sides, there's like this kind of, I don't know what you
Yeah.
call that.
I don't know, but you could like do it by the cut down, you could
Yeah.
do it by double around it.
Yep. So, Emilio looks like he's coming in from the side.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh my, what is going
But,
on?
I don't know if you caught what Gretchen was saying, but she was saying that you could also draw something up near the top and cut down through it as well. Because you can cut in from the side, and you can cut down from the top.
I made it half the size and now it says it'll take 2 hours.
Okay, well, if you wanna wait here for 2 hours for the cup to print, actually, no, that's not okay, because then it'll be 10:30 at night, the parents would be mad at me. And I'm primarily motivated by fear.
This is so weird.
Wait, I just kidding around with the. Okay, you're in like sculpt land over here.
I can't, you get scope, I've made like, oh, whoa.
I don't know, what is looking pretty.
You alright, Charlie?
I still have a functional model of
Yeah.
I don't know how to
Speak up if you need help.
Alright.
How do I,
Jeff,
how do I do things?
How do you what?
I want to remove these 2 objects.
Okay.
I don't know how.
So there's a couple different ways you could do it. The purple cube things are probably those forms, so right click on one of them and choose delete.
That's what the problem is.
Oh, it's because you're still in the formatting mode. Yeah, so right, no, that's right, yep.
So I can hit delete?
Yep.
Oh.
Look at that.
He deleted
Oh,
something.
and that's the problem.
Yep.
Jackie.
That's so nifty. Nifty.
How you doing?
I feel like
Are you enjoying your modeling experience so far?
During classes, you're awful. Like,
I
I'm not
remember
sure.
I was
What?
very protective
Sure.
of my first models,
Mhm.
and then I just trashed them all and started over.
Mhm. We've all talked about it. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left, so you guys can keep working, but I just want to say another couple of short things. How quickly you progress with this program and how fluent and how fast you get in using the program is going to be directly proportional to how much time you spend working in the program. So I know, especially for the students in the room, I know you guys all have like crazy busy schedules, but if you can just find a little bit of time, half an hour here or there, you know, in the next week or so, to create another model, right? Just pick an object, something in your room, something you can relate to, model your house, model a game piece, you know, it doesn't matter. Just pick a thing and model it and go through the process. Like working in the program more and more is really going to help you get fluent in the program, like I said. If you guys haven't finished your Empire State Building, I was kidding about giving you guys grades, but this is a really good exercise to work in. Let me throw out a couple of ideas of things you can explore. Did I mention, oh, I totally forgot to mention this, but you may have noticed on your own, as you're working through the menus in Fusion, who's up on the screen? System to Marcus? Can you go up to the Create menu and go down to like, I don't know, the extrude operation, which is one you've already used. Don't click on it, but just kind of hover the mouse. So almost everything in the menus in Fusion gives you these pop-ups, and they're actually very useful. Like the built-in help in Fusion is really handy. So what I was saying before about professionals using this program and having to depend on it to be a very fast workflow, right? I really meant that. And a lot of the tools that are in here that we haven't looked at yet, we're probably not going to go through them all one by one, but a lot of these are designed to do complicated operations very quickly, right? So go explore it, right? Go look at some of these things, and when you hover over them, like if you go down to the coil, it's like halfway down. Select a plane, then draw a circle to specify the major diameter of the coil. Finish defining the coil using manipulators dialog box. So those words might be a little confusing, but that's basically telling you exactly what you need to do to use that tool, right? And you're not going to break the tool. So go in and play with it and try these things out, because those are going to give you ideas that you can use in models in the future, okay? So if you can find just a little bit of time this week to play with the program more on your own, it's going to help you a lot, okay? So I'm not actually giving you homework, but I strongly suggest you try to find a little bit of time to do that. The other thing is, if you haven't finished your Empire State Building, a couple other things you might think about if you're going for scale. If you're really careful, you can count the stories in the photo, because stories have windows. And you can double check your work, because the Wikipedia article tells you how many stories tall the building is. And if you're really, really crazy and you want to create all those windows on the buildings, there's something called the rectangular pattern tool. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but go and find that. And you can use that to create lots and lots and lots of windows really quickly. So yeah, there's a lot of features like that that are sort of waiting for you to discover. All right, I'm going to stop talking there because I'm losing my my voice. Anybody have any questions? Anybody stuck? Anything like that? Yeah.
Is there a mirror tool?
Yes.
What is the key?
What is the key to using the mirror
Yeah.
tool? So give me a hypothetical and I will tell you how to do it.
I want to make a rectangle on both sides of the building that are on the same distance possible.
Okay, and are you talking about a two-dimensional sketch of a rectangle or a 3D solid of a rectangle?
Two-dimensional sketch.
Okay, so in the sketch, what you need to do is draw the midpoint that you will be mirroring along, right? So use the line tool, which is under Create, and draw a line down the center of the sketch that you will mirror across. Does that make sense? And then also in the Create menu will be the mirror tool, and you will choose the shape you want to mirror and the line that is the center line that you will mirror across. And when you select those two things, it'll mirror it for you. Yes?
So I'm working in millimeters and I'm running out of room.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So can I zoom in or do I have to scale it up?
You can zoom in or out, okay? So there's a zoom tool.
I saw the zoom thing.
Yep.
The magnifying glass,
Yep,
right?
it's a little easier. I know a lot of you guys are working on trackpads. I definitely do that sometimes. If you have a mouse with a scroll wheel, scrolling in or out with the scroll wheel moves it in and out. You might be able to two-finger drag.
Okay.
Depends on how your computer's set up, but yeah, that'll zoom in on this. And then also don't forget about the little home button, so when you get the view cube, the little home thing that hovers over that takes you out to a three-dimensional view that will give you a whole picture of your,
Yeah,
of
I've
your
used
model.
that. Now, just if we really were gonna 3D print this,
Yeah.
then I have to consider like printing something in micrometers or
well,
micrometers. Its ability to like. What's that?
yeah.
Or building it and then scaling it
I
down.
did.
Yeah, so you can model arbitrarily. If it isn't something that has to be a specific size,
Right.
you can
I just
model
started
it.
at the size.
Yeah, and then you
working
can
out.
make it bigger or littler.
Yeah.
But what we're gonna talk about, actually, this is a good lead in.
No, no, I can make
Next
it.
class, we're gonna talk about modeling things accurately, because if you're building something like, this part has the Raspberry Pi mounted to it, the mounting holes have to be in the right place or you can't mount the thing, right? We're gonna talk about how to do that. So you can make something of arbitrary size and scale if it's 3D printing, but we're also gonna talk about how to measure something very precisely and then model it accurately to reflect that. Does that help?
What if I want? Yes, it does.
Okay.
Next question.
Sure.
What if I want to model like a lumpy rock?
Yeah. Then
What
Fusion
tool
in
should I play with?
the sculpt environment, which we're not really going to talk about in this class because that's really more of a free-form kind of environment. But I will just mention that Autodesk, which is a company that makes Fusion, their online content, like on YouTube, for Fusion is amazing. So if you go to their channel and look for a tutorial like an intro to the sculpting environment, it'll take you right through. And that might be really interesting for you.
Cool.
So go and watch one of their videos and they're really, really good.
Thanks.
Sure. Anybody else? You look like you had a question. You look like you have a curious mind. I'm just waiting for these questions to come out. Okay. All right. We're good then. Thank you, everybody. Hope you had fun. And let's do this again next week.
Are we gonna come back to these? Should I save this or?
And it's up to you. I mean, save everything. Oh, you mean on this computer?
Yeah,
It's up to you. Do you want to do anything with it?
And I.
Is this a competition?
I'm not that.
Always.
I hope not.
We could make it one.
Make it interesting.
Passing up there, mine came out pretty good.
That's amazing.
The other buildings in the background was like.
Yeah, you use the pattern tool for that.
Yeah, no, just press.
So do you think you're gonna be able to sort out the problem you were having installing Fusion, or do you need help?
I probably need help.
This is sheet metal button, I wanna play with that.
You have fun?
Take a look.
Yeah. Good. Mission accomplished. Need more water.
I feel like I should have it pretty. But I'm not sure.
What's working?
What about the render button? Oh no, the animation button. That one would be fine.
Spilled their soda.
He's gotta make a cut.
Wow, that's awesome.
Sorry, we got kind of into it and I didn't look back and, oh, you got that working now?
This seems to be working.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Thanks very much for running through the computer.
You're welcome.
Tomorrow you're off to
Services
cups.
on this. on
Excellent,
different sides.
thank you for doing that.
You're gonna extrude them.
So are you at Shapley?
Well,
Okay, so you're eighth grade. Okay, cool. And Gretchen used to work at.
On different
Okay.
sides.
Oh, wow.
Well,
Okay.
you know what the trick is?
You got a question?
Should I shut off?
Yeah,
this
so,
computer?
No, I just-
thanks so much.
Sure.
And, yeah, now that I knew there was kind of warning, I'll probably just drop now.
How do I delete?
Oh yeah, that's totally fine.